Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to the third talk of the evening. My name is Mathieu Charles. I work for an advocacy organization in Belgium, and I'm also a performance artist and yeah, I guess a theorist. And I'm joined today, this evening, by wonderful people. I think we're still waiting on someone. I think Spiritchild is not here yet. But perhaps in the meantime, we will talk about the movement, voices from the movement in the United States, and perhaps we can start with introducing ourselves. Start with you, Kristian.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kristian Bailey. I'm a writer and activist based in Chicago, though currently in New York for the quarantine. Most of my work focuses on Palestine solidarity and specifically around building solidarity between the Black and Palestinian struggles. And it's through that work that actually I first came to Brussels for the first time for Israeli Apartheid Week a few years ago, and was able to engage with anti-colonial organizers in Belgium and France, and specifically at L'Espace in Brussels. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to other colonized people who are fighting racism in Europe and in this territory, like Asha. And yeah, just looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, Aja? Yeah, you're currently muted. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the host has to unmute me, so I couldn't unmute myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Asha Mone. I'm a poet, organizer, and cultural worker from originally East New York, Brooklyn, and I currently live in Little Haiti, Miami for the past a little over 5 years. I've been working and organizing with organizations Dream Defenders and Community Justice Project. Dream Defenders was founded after the brutal murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012, and a bunch of uprisings that also came out of that moment and helped politicize a generation of young Black people across the country, which ended up sparking the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I'm grateful to be here. I've been in community and in conversation with my comrades in Belgium for a while now. It is really interesting to see all of this unfold. I've done a lot of solidarity work as well, organizing delegations to Philistine and making that bridge between what's happening here and what's happening abroad. So we'll get more into that, but that's pretty much the gist of it.
Okay. Well, perhaps we can start off with these realities in the sense of this local movement in the United States, and then the global aspect of it and how it's resonating across different regions in the world, where there's on the one hand solidarity with what is happening in the United States. On the other hand, looking at how it translates to what is happening here with the different peoples who are being oppressed within these structural and institutional racist systems. So, what can you say about that, or what is your perspective from that point, Kristian?
I think he has to be unmuted too.
Oh. I don't think I can unmute him. Yeah, or you can start, Aja, while we wait on Kristian to be unmuted.
Can you ask your question again specifically, please?
Yeah, so we have this this local reality in the United States, which resonates globally. You touched it in your introduction, but how do you see it unfolding? Because from an overseas, how we say it in Europe and in other parts of the world, we look at the United States as a sort of sort of front runner. A lot of the justice movements have a lot of influence on what is on the youth and on different movements here in Belgium and in Europe specifically. But how do you look at how these things are unfolding? And because you've been on different sides of this narrative, how do you see the differences and the things that are similar?
Well, I would say first that we are a part of a movement, and it's really important to acknowledge that all of us are a part of a movement that began long before we were born. And a lot of people enter a movement and want to start from scratch and think they're the first people to be woke and to learn what's happening. But when you actually study history and you look at the project, the colonial project, settler colonial project that is the United States of America, you learn that this land was founded off of the brutal, colonization of indigenous people and genocide, mass genocide. And then you think of how that began and sparked a movement, a resistance that, the story would be told that indigenous people just, took that and didn't fight back, but they fought back very much so and had the support of the European community to help them in this raping and pillaging of indigenous people for the sake of land and monetary gain. And so when you talk about that context of Black and African people being brought into the American global, the colonial settler project that is American, but also European, very much European, then you have to also talk about the foundation of this country. The very root of this country is rooted on a solidarity across colonialism that our oppressors are working together and are very, very, very strategic about how they align themselves. And so we have to be conscious of that our oppressors are working together. In order for us to get free, we need to be working together to recognize the connections and the interpersonal struggles that we have in order to get free. And I say that when Black people get free, we free the world. And we have to organize our communities and to tell the stories of how we came to be. A big part of, I think, what's incredible about this moment and this uprising is that we're no longer the only ones showing up to the protests and the marches, because Black people are truly the only people that have really been the true Americans. We have taken the democratic process through and through. We've marched, we've protested, we've worked to the bone, we've done everything in our power to gain dignity and respect, and yet we still are treated with the brutal force of violence. And so I think a big part of what we try to focus on is that we're part of a movement, and this movement is a collection of many people who have been struggling for a very long time to build across nationalities and identities for us to get free.
Okay.
And I'm unmuted now, so hopefully you all can hear me.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Asha, I do want to root my response acknowledging that the United States is stolen land and stolen territory. And to note that even though I have an American or a US passport, it feels weird to have to refer to the United States, to myself as an American, in the context of being oppressed by the United States. And if we look to the root of policing in the U.S., we see that the first police forces were set up to patrol and capture Africans who had run away from slavery. And they were also set up to protect stolen land from indigenous people who were fighting to reclaim their territory. And so from 400 years ago to today, that's a constant narrative of the role that the police play. In the United States, it's to protect the property of colonizers and to oppress and police the colonized populations that are simply trying to live and survive under these brutal kind of contexts. And so the recent police murders that we've seen, first of Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old EMT worker who was killed in her sleep when the police raided her house pretty much illegally, to George Floyd, who we saw be murdered on video by police in Minneapolis. All of these incidents of police violence are part of a string of anti-Black violence that goes back for centuries. And so the protests that are happening right now, I mean, we've seen them in many cycles. So I think the last kind of big cycle that our family in Europe will remember is the uprisings after Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, that led to the emergence of this so-called Black Lives Matter moment. It's the moment in which I became an activist and started doing work on Black Palestinian solidarity. But I think each wave we're seeing that people are getting more and more tired of police brutality. Like Asha noted, I've been really surprised to see just how many people who aren't Black and in the midst of a pandemic are coming out in the streets to protest for Black lives, and even to the degree of normalizing notions such as defunding or abolishing the police. So it's really an interesting moment that we're in that I think builds on not only the last period of 5 years ago, but of every period of Black struggle and uprising in this territory.
Okay, we touched on a lot of interesting things. I want to start with you're mentioning Palestinian Black Palestinian project.
Solidarity.
Solidarity. I read Ramon Grossfogel, professor, and I will quote him. He said that we live in the Palestinification of the world, in the sense that what is happening in Palestine now is a sort of lab experiment where Israel or are experimenting on ways to oppress people and are exporting that oppression and that knowledge of how to oppress to the rest of the Western world and other parts of the world, in the sense where they are training police forces everywhere in Europe and in the United States, where they are exporting that knowledge through their companies like G4S. Is that something that you are aware of, or that where you have something to say?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I imagine each of us have thoughts on this. I think there's degrees where that comparison or information is useful and helpful, and then there's other ways in which it's not. So it is to acknowledge that there is an exchange between Israel and forces of repression around the world. Israel is one of the largest exporters of drones, which it gets to test on Palestinians in Gaza and then export to countries like Brazil, where they were used to police people in the favelas protesting displacement during the Olympics, for example. We've seen some of Israel's tactics against crowd repression being used against indigenous protesters at Standing Rock. Just in general, there are exchanges of tactics, but I think it's important to note that the police in the US aren't repressive or racist because they're being trained by Israel. Repressive forces around the world aren't repressive because they are being trained by Israel. It all actually fits into a deeper legacy of colonialism that is Europe's responsibility primarily. And just to give you an example of this, so before I went to France and Belgium a few years ago, a comrade helped trace kind of the flow of colonialism back and forth between these territories, and pointed out that I was traveling from Detroit, which was indigenous territory that was first colonized by the French, and where the first slaves and the territory were brought there by the French, which allowed France to become an imperial power that later allowed it to carve up the Middle East with Britain to create the Palestinian issue. Around the same time, we see France fighting the decolonization of Algeria, and we see Israel and France exchanging support and military weapons to one another. So France is actually to Israel in 1956 during the Suez Crisis. They provided arms during 1967 when Israel occupied Egypt and Syria and what we now know as the West Bank and Gaza. And even in terms of drones, the first drones that Israel bought were from the US. And then in the process of fighting Egyptians who were trying to resist Israeli colonization of their land, Israel developed the first live surveillance drone technology that is now used around the world. So it doesn't work to say that Israel is responsible for repression of other people. It's actually an exchange and interchange between European colonial forces over many, many centuries.
Okay. Hi, Spirit. Yeah, perhaps Asha wants to add something to this, or no?
Nah, he basically said what needed to be said.
Okay. Well, there's this global colonial project. I've heard it being called the death cult. I've heard it being called the Christian-centric, Western-centric, patriarchal, global movement of oppression. You touched earlier also the police as a tool of white supremacy, or I'm rephrasing it. And there are a lot of voices that call for the defunding and abolishment of the police. How or what does that encompass? What is that specifically? How does this project would be done?
Sure. Could we give Spirit a moment to introduce?
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm a bad host. I'm such a bad host. Oh my God, I'm sorry, Spirit. Yeah, I'm sorry. I really was in. Yeah. Hi, Spirit.
Peace,
yeah.
peace. Peace to everybody, beautiful brothers and sisters, black and brown. How you feeling? How you feeling? Good to see your faces. I've been here. I've been listening. Just the first, I'm not really on Zoom like that for many reasons. So that's the first thing. But I had to figure out some connections and all that, and now we're here. But I've been watching and listening and checking it out. My name is Spirit, freedom singer, freedom artist from New York, from the South Bronx, living on Staten Island right now. Part of many formations. Currently, right now, the new Black Arts Movement in the spirit and legacy of the original Black Arts Movement. We have our elders who we learned from and by, the Black Panthers who are still alive and kicking. Asha Mone, thank you for mentioning them, that we're building off a legacy, that we're continuing that. The Young Lords as well, people from International, Zapatista. So we're learning and organizing from all our communities. And just wanted to shout out all the people that we just had a call with our brothers and sisters out in Belgium earlier, just a few hours ago, to start our Maroon Mondays to continue this revolutionary praxis and basically really work on education. Because outside, when everything and all the storm is clear, we need to focus and come back to the education. And if we can remember not to forget certain things, maybe we could sustain our revolutionary movements and actions. But our main focus right now has been in the prisons. We've been doing a lot of work out in Belgium, with Belgian youth out there in prison, adults as well, through Commusaic. We've been doing a lot of work here on Rikers Island at Sing Sing, working with our young brothers and sisters there. So our work primarily has been youth focused. And I heard the earlier panel, I think it was one of the first ones, where there was a disconnect with the young people, or that there was a conversation about why are people in a particular manner or where they're going, and about miseducation and that we're not reaching the youth. Just to say, we are always reaching the youth. The youth are always with us. I have 2 young Black children who they come with me to protest. Except for right about now, it's kind of hot, so they're staying home. But I'm going out there, and they usually come out for the protest. 022 has been doing this. Stolen Lives Project has been doing this. Justice Committee, Cop Watching. So that's kind of me in a hyper nutshell.
Okay. Cool. Welcome. So perhaps I will rephrase it because there's something I thought about. So with the defunding and the abolishment of the police, but also linked, of course, with the abolishment of prisons or the whole prison system, because those two are interlinked, of course. Perhaps it was wrong to say how will we do that, but what are the effects of abolishing, defunding police? What is going to the police now, for example, in the United States, because it's one of the most heavily funded, I think, I don't know how to call it, but one of the most heavily funded gangs in the United States. Can you tell some more about what that call for defunding and abolishment means?
Well, hopefully, if people are doing construction outside, so hopefully this is not too loud. So in working with the Dream Defenders based here in Florida, Florida is one of the largest private prisons, states with the largest amount of private prisons in the country. And one of the things we've been organizing around is altering our value systems and getting people to believe and know what the laws are and think about what is possible and breaking down what we know to be true about the current system and the way that things operate. So we started a sort of manifesto of sorts called the Freedom Papers. And a big part of that was looking at how we could shift the culture and to really transform people's imaginations of what was possible. And usually we go for reform, right? That's the conversation that has been had. It's like, how can we reform? How can we, put a pat of wrist on one police officer's, charge and give a conviction and but at the end of the day, we're looking at for systemic transformational justice. And a big part of one of the freedoms that we talk about, there's 7 freedoms that we talk about. One of the freedoms that we talk about is freedoms from police and prisons, and they go hand in hand. Kristian talked a little bit about this earlier, but the police were never meant to protect or serve us. Businesses started the first organized police force in Boston in 1838 to protect their property and to safeguard and transport goods. So a big part of what we are trying to do is to get people to understand the history so that we know what's possible in order to be able to imagine a future. Plantation owners have turned into, what used to be plantation owners turned into prison owners, and private corporations like G4S or GEO groups make billions of dollars off of caging us. So it's incentivizing, did I say that right? Incentivizing white people, primarily poor, middle-class white people, to criminalize the poor Black people. And so there's benefits. There's actual financial, monetary benefits of filling. They say that for every child that's born, Black child that's born, there's a prison bed being put in, And so we have to make the connection between policing and private prisons because there's an economy going on, and capitalism is a big part of why we have to have these conversations. Yes, it's a race issue. Yes, it's about being weaponized around being Black being a weapon, right? But there's also a real deep-rooted issue around capitalism and neoliberalism in this country. And so when we talk about defunding the police, we're saying that we need to stop incentivizing police officers to murder and try to arrest Black people, and to create humane justice, to have meditation, resolution, violence prevention, and the banning of bail and probation, the reinvestment of money spent on prison to police into social services and into our community that addresses the actual root causes of poverty and violence and doesn't continue to indict people for being poor. And that's currently how our system is run. So when you talk about policing, you can't talk about policing without talking about prisons in this country because they go hand in hand.
You want to add something, Spirit or Kristian?
Yeah, Spirit, you can go ahead. I think you're on mute, though.
You have to be unmuted.
Thank you, Kristian. I just want to just shout out Minnesota, Minneapolis. This disbanding and beginning to take out the resources from the local oppressors or colonizers or occupiers in our community is not the first, right? Because it was also in Camden in 2013. They also did that in Jersey, Camden, Jersey. But I do want to highlight and shout out our brothers and sisters out there for doing that and making that effort. And I think some people get a little confused, right? Like, it's real simple. You know, the cops shouldn't be in schools. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's money and police officers are getting funding for that. The cops, as our sister Linda would say, they're not mental health workers or providers. So why are they out there trying to de-escalate and play that kind of role? All they do is escalate tension in our communities. Also, you know, as we know, they're here for property, right? Not really for people. So they shouldn't be patrolling our communities in the manner in which they're patrolling them. New York City has way too many police officers who've been doing this for years, and most of the kids out in Rikers or Sing Sing or wherever we work at, you'd find somebody just being at the wrong place, the wrong time, people getting picked up for loitering, for just being on their block. You know, so to fund an apparatus that condones that kind of activity, it's criminal in itself. You know, so I think it's only humane for people to start thinking this way. It should have been done a long time ago, and that should have been our movement a long time ago. A lot of mothers out here, there's a call tomorrow at City Hall who are demanding for that particular type of justice as well as accountability. I mean, like arresting the police officers who have assassinated people in our community. I think even adding to that defunding, we should put some funding into creating a database so that we know where all these police officers or whatever they want to call themselves live. I think the about of community control is accountability, and most of these people are not in our communities. At least where I'm from, they're not from our community. So if we know where they live and who they are, where their children are, I mean, we have a different relationship. I feel we could balance that out. So the defunding, disbanding, yeah, there's the policy and all that, and it makes a lot of sense. And again, just building off people like Critical Resistance, who've been talking about abolition work for years, from Angela Davis, people who've been carrying that legacy through cop watching, and again, the Black Panthers, who have been trying in their own way to defund or disband or disarm this criminal force.
Yeah. And I mean, I just want to say that the police are literally an occupying army in Black and poor communities in this country. And if we understand the US as a colonial force and as an imperial force, its police are the occupying army domestically, and its military is an occupying army abroad. And so in a similar way that we call for divestment from Israel for its military occupation of Palestine and violations against Palestinians, defunding and abolishing police is a process of divesting from a violent system here in occupied territory. And so even as an organizer, I have trouble sometimes like articulating to people, well, what does it mean to abolish police, or what happens, what are alternatives if there's no police? And what has been helpful about this moment has been it's clarified for more and more people what exactly that looks like. First, in terms of defunding, it means that in many cases, in many cities, police have the largest budgets of any department across the city, whether it's education, health, or other services. And so it means eliminating money from that budget and putting money into investing into community resources that actually take care of people. On the level of abolition, it's not saying that there's not a need for communities to be safe. It's saying that for example, if somebody has a broken taillight, you don't need an armed officer to tell them that it's broken. You could have a civic servant say, hey, your taillight's broken, here's where you go to fix it. It means instead of criminalizing somebody that is homeless and sleeping on a bus station seat, you don't need somebody with a gun to potentially escalate the situation to someone being murdered. you need services that are able to say, okay, here's somewhere for you to sleep tonight, and here's a system for you to get back on track. It means that if someone's having a mental health crisis, again, you don't need police to show up. You need trained specialists who can help somebody come down from where they are and give them the resources that they need. So all of these things are things that are definitely possible if we just remove the massive amounts of funding that police get and reinvest them into resources that actually serve the public.
I've been seeing or hearing some news items on social media where there are different cities that said, okay, we will defund we will cut the budget of the police, but when I looked deeper, then it was just a very small fragment of that budget. Do you see it happen that cities will really take this momentum to really implement that change, or is it just window dressing in that sense, where they just cut small budgets, but still just to appease the uproar? Yeah.
I think that we've been talking about how there's been a big focus on abolition and not enough focus on revolution. And the only reason why I think it's important to talk about it in that context is because we're talking about workers at the end of the day. Police officers are workers. They're hired by somebody. They answer to somebody, right? There's somebody else that they are covering for. And I think when we go into institutions and we start talking about systems and we start talking about how power works and the people who have all the consolidated wealth, not just in this country, but in this globe, then we start to have a really different kind of conversation, right? Police are just a symptom of the issue. They are, they're paid servants for people who really have a need to control the masses that is starting to get fed up, basically. And so what we see is that once people, because this is a moment that we're also talking about a raise in consciousness and collective consciousness. We can't talk about politics if we're not talking about the spirit, and we're not talking about psychology, and we're not talking about the interior world. Once people start waking up and looking around and saying, wait, why am I trying to kill my brother for nothing, for scraps, when the whole world, all these other people with all this money are sitting around living in a life of luxury? We're not talking about equity and just diversity and inclusion and some representation and some black people with more wealth, and the police just look cute and they got little nice badges and they don't got guns no more. We're talking about real redistribution of resources and a reckoning with the raping and pillaging of indigenous resources across the globe. So this is why this is just a little spark. That's why we talk about it as a movement, right? We can't talk about it as just an uprising in this one moment around policing. This uprising did not just come out of nowhere. We just finished staying at home for 3 months without any help from our government, and with black people and poor people being the biggest people to bear the brunt of this pandemic. And so this uprising is not just about policing, right? The policing just sparked the disgust and the outrage among people across the country and the globe, because we're sitting here going through a health crisis and a pandemic, and then we still got to deal with people who are meant to protect and serve us, and we're seeing more brothers and sisters murdered in front of us on our screens daily. So there's the interior world that we're facing, right? We have to face ourselves. We're sitting around in our homes thinking, damn, I don't have a real check. The government just gave us a lousy check, $1,200, and you could barely pay rent for that. Some of us have kids. Some of us have elderly we're taking care of. Some of us don't even have running water in this country. So you're talking about something that was bound to happen. Right before this, you have to also deal with the fact that there's a campaign also going on right now, actually. Right? So, and there was a campaign that particularly one candidate that was trying to shift and make things more social and equitable in terms of Bernie Sanders. He was pushing for a movement that was around healthcare, that was around education, that was around, changing in the criminal injustice system. And these are all things that people were rallying around and wanted transformed, but we didn't see we see that the democratic establishment was more concerned with preserving the wealth of the very few than the needs of the people. And so I think you have to put all these things in context for this uprising. We're a part of a movement. I have to keep saying that because we need everybody to realize that beyond this moment, we need you. We need you to gather all of your skill sets, all of your gifts, and to step into your purpose and to not get tired, to not get complacent, to not be okay when they just defund the police or when they put a black person in office. That at the end of the day, we really need equity and redistribution of resources. This is a big part of the fight. It's not just black people parading around with nice outfits and suits and dresses. That's not what we want.
You got something to add, Spirit?
Yeah, could I was just, yeah. Thank you. I just want to connect also like what Kristian was saying about an occupying force and what Asha was saying as well. And if we, you know, the redistribution of resources, if we see that it's an occupying force and therefore, and we recognize that, then therefore we must be at war, right? If we're at war or if it's genocide or we're being slaughtered, then clearly they've never cared about us. And when you talk about COVID and our current condition and our other pandemic that we got to deal with, right? I'm hoping that this is the moment, and this is why we're trying to focus on that education a lot, because, and I'm glad you keep repeating that, repeat it. It is a movement, it's various movements. We've been doing this. Uprising looks like, you know, the space, you know what I'm saying? I know everybody here has been there and has worked there. It's alternative spaces. It's things that are independent from the state that doesn't care about us. Places like in Chiapas, Mexico, where we learn from the Zapatistas, the Black Panthers bringing these lessons of saying, you know, they're not going to deal with our health conditions with sickle cell anemia. Everybody always thinks about and glorify those moments when the Panthers were marching with guns. But there's a lot of things that they were doing outside of just marching with guns and protecting in that particular military tactic. And we don't want, and I hope that when this year passes, we don't want the images to just be like, oh, there was a violent roar, and then like what happened, you know, and forgetting about all these communities that have been continuously working. And regardless if they give us those resources and reallocate them back to the community in which they need to do that, I mean, that's part of their reparations plan that should be, if they want to have any kind of peace with us. Regardless if they do that, we have to know that we are resourceful. We have been brought here as a resource. We are brilliant, beautiful, brave people. We can do whatever the hell we want. We don't need them, but we definitely don't need them on our backs. So that helps a little bit when you don't give them more money for guns or artillery. But for sure, we don't need your money. We don't need your help, because what your help looks like is blankets. You know what I'm saying? We don't want your blankets. We don't want your disease infected, your corrupted, your manipulating kind of things. I mean, even where we're going right now with this, and I hope this revolution, I'm talking this holistic, when we think about our children, you know, COVID is sparking this whole thing of how we're going to educate our children, and everybody's going on their Zoom calls and they doing their thing and whatever, you know, but our minds have to be prepared for that other conditioning that they're doing, that other filtering and funneling through these devices. Bill Gates getting contract to have conversations with the governor about how they're going to actually fix this situation or be a part of technology. I'm really concerned about that. And like, we don't need that type of education. And as long as teachers, doctors, as you said, civil servant workers, as long as they keep believing that there is some part of the state that actually cares about us, every moment that happens, I feel like it's a dagger to my heart. Like, we're losing. We need you to stay focused, okay? They never cared about us. We need your resources, just like Cuba, when they send their doctors out to Italy and do the things that most governments who are living right next door wouldn't even do. You know, that kind of selflessness, that kind of community, you can't just have that. That is grown, and we need to grow that back within our community so that people don't have to feel that they need to stay for education, for protection, for anything. Definitely damn now not no imprisonment at all. So we just need to abolish prison. When we talk about restorative justice looks like how you building with your community members. You know, do you call the cops when there's a little scuffle here and there? Do you stop and take your phones out or whatever you have and record police when you see a 14-year-old being harassed or even detained peacefully by police officers? Like, we need to have everybody stop, watch, and say, no, these are our people. We need to protect them by any means, and we need to move forward with that and not rely on the state or anybody to take our kids away or do anything to our elders or anything like that. So, yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what Asha's been saying is that we are part of a movement, and it's a global movement. Like, the reason that any of us are sitting in the United States or Belgium or Europe right now is because Europe colonized our lands and our territories. In the case of those of us in the US, it stole us and brought us to this continent. And our homelands are still suffering from those legacies. So it's our responsibility as colonized people, wherever we are, to do whatever we can to uplift our communities, to, as Spirit is talking about, build alternative forms of community power. But we're really asking our family and comrades in Europe, as there's an uprising here, we also need you to turn it up and to rise up. Because the more of us that are organizing and agitating and building revolution, as Asha is talking about, at the same time, it's just going to spark more and more and more of that around the world. And that's really what we need at this time to build the future that we need to survive.
That's great. And it's something important, the future and imagining the future, in the sense where in the present, the future is something that is not a given in that sense, or that they are trying to take away that imagining of future by installing all these systems. So I mean, it's very inspiring what all of you are saying. Also for this global movement, and also all these forces that are trying to work against it. Of course. I see Olav has joined us. Welcome also. And I think that you are going to close this conversation, this panel. I don't know. Perhaps before I give you the word, do any of you still want to say something or add something to?
I wanted to add one thing about love and radical, like, self-love. And in this moment, I'm not talking about that self-care type stuff, but one of the things that I think is really crucial in this fight that we need to talk about, and comes from a Black radical feminist tradition, is that we can't get free if we are not doing the work on ourselves. We cannot. And the last thing we need is some patriarchal, nutso, white anarchists that just is mad at daddy that want to ruin and tear down a whole movement. We need people to really do the self-work, to love themselves, to deeply search what is it within themselves that makes them feel insecure, makes them feel alone and isolated, to realize that they are part of a movement that loves them. They are part of a movement that has been waiting for them to rise into their purpose and into their power. But we cannot rise as a community, as a global community, as national communities, if we are not doing the work on ourselves. I beg of you, take the time to heal, to resolve whatever it is in you that remains unresolved, because this is how we get free. This is how we are going to get free. It's through our joy, it's through our exercises of self-preservation, it's through self-determination, and it's how we love the people closest to us. So don't be out here talking this revolutionary stuff if you ain't taking care of the lady next to you and you ain't taking care of the brother next to you. That's the root of how we start this movement. Don't be talking all that rhetoric now. Let me catch you doing that rhetoric and you're not actually loving the people around you in your circle, in your immediate circle. We got to start local and with every person around us, and then we can reverberate that and change the world.
Thank you. Yeah, you want to say something, Spirit?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. I'm just gonna say that there won't be a fourth panel. So so yeah, go ahead.
I definitely. I mean, I wanna, and I didn't really stress the other part of definitely the holistic revolution is that spirituality. Just yesterday, we do a monthly kind of spiritual circle. We also, I thank you for reminding us that, Asha, because we need to root ourselves in our indigeneity. and our practice and take care of ourselves as a community. And I'm thinking education, spiritual, arm yourselves and whatever you can to protect yourselves. And solidarity looks like this. You know, thank you to Rashida and Mathieu for like having this platform. The space has been always dear to our heart, and we hope to see it manifest in some particular form of an institution, so to speak, for our communities to continue to grow.
And I'll just say that what really heartened me about my visits to the space and meeting the diasporas in Europe is just the promise of what it looks like for different diasporas to work together, who experience colonialism in different ways, but are all living in the same place today. Whether that's the indigenous comrades of North Africa, our comrades from the sub-Saharan continent or the Caribbean who were colonized, or even I met someone from the French colonies in what do you call that? Like Southeast Asia, that I just didn't realize how big the empire was until coming to Europe. But there's really so much potential in all of us working together for justice for not only our individual communities, but for us collectively. And so I wish you all the best in your work to do that in Brussels.
Yeah, shout out to Cafe Congo and all the people, Gia and Rashida.
Okay, Olav, I will give you the final word, and thank you for everything you said, everyone, the whole evening, all the other panels also. It was very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Merci pour la parole, Mathieu. C'est un grand honneur, mais aussi un comment on dit ça en français, un challenge. Let me just do
challenge.
Un challenge, French, un challenge. C'est quand même une soirée très intense avec des témoignages émotionnels, expérientiels, mais aussi des analyses politiques, économiques, historiques, juridiques, des dimensions incroyables. Je suis très content qu'on a pris les presque 3 heures qu'on est en train de parler là. On a commencé à 20 heures. Les 2 heures et demie qu'on a pris pour inviter tous ces gens, pour leur donner l'espace et la plateforme de vraiment partager leurs connaissances, parce que il y a beaucoup de choses à dire concernant Black Lives Matter, concernant comment on dit, il y a un en français de Black Lives Matter, non, il n'y en a pas. Hein. Il y en a, c'est pas nécessaire. de violence policière, de racisme institutionnel sur le présent, le passé, le futur. Il y a beaucoup de choses à dire. Et personnellement, la semaine passée, nee, 2 weken geleden, begon ik vooral met heel veel voelen. Toen we de beelden weer zagen van George Floyd, begon ik met heel veel gevoelens. Eerst ook vooral een soort van stilte, een soort van verlamming. Ja, het is echt wel ableist taal, maar een onvermogen van wat nu, wat te doen. En wat daarna heel snel gebeurde, waren mensen in Nederland, in België, die me aanspraken en die tegen me zeiden, we moeten wat doen. Het wordt tijd om echt wat te doen. We kunnen de kameraden in Amerika, we can't let them on their own. We have to let them know that we stand with them. And but also a need also to and there's something, I think the strength and the power and the potential of the Black Lives Matter movement is that it has so much room for so many of us throughout the world, such a framework where we can also tell our stories. So 2 weeks ago in the Netherlands, in Belgium, people came, we were all feeling a lot, we felt, and we started moving forward, and it involved learning so quickly, so much, not just people, not just new ways of organizing. Like in Amsterdam, we organized, on Saturday, we thought we had a talk. On Sunday, we created a WhatsApp group, and we decided in the evening on Sunday, in the late afternoon, that we were going to do a demonstration. On Monday, the demonstration happened, and 10,000 people showed up. 10,000 people showed up with maybe a few hours notice. On Tuesday, we had another demonstration. About 5,000 people showed up in The Hague. In Rotterdam, I'm pretty sure it was 30,000 people showed up. I mean, this is the move. This is the momentum. This is what we're talking about. This time in history that we are at, and it has involved learning how to organize with new people in my life. It has involved learning new ways of organizing with these Zooms and WhatsApp groups and whatnot. It's been very frustrating, I tell you very honestly. I think that le fait que tout ça a commencé environ 1 mois et demi, 2 mois après Corona, des fois j'ai quand même l'impression qu'on devrait être reconnaissant parce que Corona quand même nous a préparé au moins 1 mois et demi à comment s'organiser dans toutes ces nouvelles plateformes. Voilà. Et je suis très impressionné par les jeunes gens qu'on j'ai rencontrés, qu'on a entendus aujourd'hui, par les gens qui ont été victimes. On est tous victimes, mais il y a d'autres qui ont été victimes d'un peu plus proche. Des gens qui ont servi aussi comme un peu comme guide, les gens qu'on vient d'entendre de l'Amérique. I don't know how to best sort of, what we were hoping to do in the last panel was to really kind of talk about what kind of future and what kind of things we need to work on and ahead. And like I said, there's so much. We didn't get to do the panel because 2 of the panelists made the very legitimate, valid, and important choice to take care of themselves, to prioritize, to make other choices at this very moment. All these people have been organizing nonstop for the last 7, 8, 10 days. And it looks like they're going to be organizing nonstop for the next few months, perhaps. And they made that decision tonight. I applaud them for it. And I even thank them for it because I do not believe in martyrs. I believe that every single one of us is needed and necessary. So when you're getting to a point where you realize that you need to stop, take a break, I applaud that, and I thank you for doing so. And this is something which connects to what Asha Mone was saying about care. A few days ago, I made a post on my Facebook telling my network, I like to write from my own place, from like what's happening to me. And I said, I've been organizing and it's been so intense, and I appreciate people tagging me in all kinds of messages like, oh, who are the Black trans people you need to be following in these times? Who are the Black women you need to be, sort of learning from and all that. And I appreciate that, and having like maybe 3,000 more followers on Instagram in 4 days is fun or something. But I was noticing that throughout that the new people following me, that it wasn't really making my life better. In fact, the organizing was taking so much from me. So I made a call and I said, listen, you know what would really help? Don't tag me in some messages of like which Black trans people to follow. Make sure, help me get groceries. I am not leaving the house. I'm not cooking. I'm realizing after like 9 o'clock when the stores are closed that I haven't eaten. I'm not taking my medication. I'm not going to the pharmacy. My house is a mess. I'm not cleaning. And so I want to ask you all to not just follow us, give us money. We need the money. We're really, I think, COVID-19 hit Black people and Black communities and racialized communities really hard. But this time as well, none of us have been doing our regular gigs. Some of us have not even been showing up at work just to get the organizing going, just to get this movement going. Pay us for our time, pay us for our work, pay us for what we're teaching you, but also take care of us. Find out not only like where our PayPal is, but find out how you can bring us food. Find out how to help us get our houses cleaned. And not only these activists and these accounts that you're following, but also every Black person right now in your life, every person of color right now in your life, every Native person right now in your life needs that right now. We all started from a place of like, what's a better word for paralysis is so incredibly ableist, of shock and of not being able to move and
stagnation. No.
And stagnation. I think so many of us find healing in the activist work, but some of us can't even do the activist work. That's inaccessible to them, and yet they're also in that place of stagnation. Also, their homes are not clean. Also, their groceries are not being done. So reach out and help that way as well. We have a lot, on a beaucoup de travail à faire dans le futur. We hebben echt nog heel veel werk te doen. Ik hoop dat iedereen die heeft meegeluisterd vandaag in deze 2,5 uur, nu 2 uur en 40 minuten, want ik praat heel lang, hè? Sorry hoor, maar iedereen die heeft meegeluisterd, ik hoop dat jullie de verschillende organisaties die hierbij betrokken zijn geweest, van Belgian Network for Black Lives, Café Congo, Le Spas, which has really, struggled the last since January, being closed down by a very greedy landlord, capitalist, obviously, and many other Black Speaks Back in the Netherlands. I mean, I know the Dutch ones because ik kom van Nederland, maar er zijn heel veel organisaties die hierbij betrokken zijn geweest, die jullie aandacht verdienen, die jullie ondersteuning verdienen, jullie hulp verdienen, maar vooral ook, we can't do it by ourselves. We will burn out. We will all burn out in the coming months ahead if not each one of us takes responsibility for this system. And I have to say that I'm looking at the people with the most privilege in this society, and I call you as well to get moving. We cannot do without the resources that are available to you. We cannot do without the privileges that you have been given, without asking for it. We cannot do without. So I want us to move beyond sort of watching Black people and people of color do the work. I want you to move beyond showing up at demonstrations, which has been great, but I want you to think, I don't know. I'm also getting very tired. I don't know what to say anymore. And maybe that's the next thing we need to do. We need to have perhaps a conversation about what we need to do further. Keep us in your hearts. Keep us in your prayers if you pray. Give us your money if you've got money. Advocate if you've got the platforms to advocate. Make the relevant policies, the policies that change, what's going on, if you've got the power to make new policies. And I want to thank everybody. The moderators, you were all great. The speakers, jullie waren geweldig. Je veux aussi remercier beaucoup de personnes qui sont absolument invisibles pour vous et par choix, qui ont choisi de ne pas être visibles. Des gens qui ont donné leur âme, leur corps, leur connexion, leur tout pour où on en est maintenant. Je veux leur remercier. Je ne veux pas leur nommer leur nom parce qu'ils ne veulent pas être visible. I also want to do a special thank you for the person who has spent, I think, 2 days setting up all these technicalities that allow us to do this, that allow us to connect over time, space. I mean, America, what time is it in where you are? It's
4:30.
It's 4:30. We're at 10:45. So we're transcending time and space, people. And all of that is thanks to the work of Keltoum Belorf. You can't see her. I am very, very appreciative of the time, the patience you've had with all of us, explaining us things. And I certainly hope to do a lot more work with you in the future. Thank you all very much. Have a great night. Have a great day in America. And keep the uprising, keep the movement going.